Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our Women of Water EOCP 2023 conference. I almost caught myself there saying 2024. I don't know, I guess I'm already getting excited about next year, which I'm looking forward to. I hope you really enjoyed Wendy's talk. I know I did. I found some of the things really resonated strongly with me. For those of you who don't know, I've spent the last year and a half on sabbatical. And so I went and did a lot of the things that Wendy was talking about. I had that list, and I went and did all sorts of unreasonable things that I didn't think a then 50-year-old woman who hadn't been on a construction site in 30 years should do. I did those. And one of the things I learned coming out of that process was thinking about change is harder than change. I had so much spinning thoughts and anxiety and worries about how it was all going to go. And most of the time, how it went was way better than I thought it was going to go. And when it did go poorly, it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. So if you're thinking about empowering yourself to go down a different direction or to go after that next career opportunity, go for it. Stop thinking about it and just do it, because thinking about change is harder than change. So on that note, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Alison Chan. She's from CDM Smith, Canada. Alison is a wastewater engineer by trade and works at CDM Smith, Canada, supporting capital infrastructure projects in the Lower Mainland. Her identity is as a cishet Asian woman. Now, I had to ask Alison what cishet meant, and I felt really old in that moment. And she explained it to me that cis meant that she was cisgendered, which meant that she identified with the gender that she was born as, and het mean that she is she likes dudes. And so I was like, oh, cool. Now I'm a cool cat too, and I can use that word with my 20-year-old daughter. And yeah, so I was really happy to be educated in new terminology, and I'm always excited when language changes. So Alison, I sort of lost my thought there because I was so excited about the new word. So Alison is a cishet Asian woman in Canada and has shaped the way she moves in and reacts to this world in both personal and professional realms. She sees courage in vulnerability, strength in empathy, and resilience in building community. With these values at the helm, she enjoys leading and mentoring teams and believes incremental change can occur through leading by example. She's here to give us a talk on providing practical solutions for surviving and thriving in a male-dominated environment. Alison, can you come up to the stage, please? Oh, good.
Yeah, liking dudes is a much easier way of saying heterosexual. So I'm really excited to be here. I love this cozy room, and we designed today specifically for me to go after Wendy. Why do I keep messing up names? To go after Wendy. I think just gonna get my clicker. And so practical solutions for surviving in a male-dominated environment. So that's possibly this industry. It could be other parts of your life that are male-dominated as well. I'm going to speak to kind of all of that. Similar to Wendy, there's paper still, I think, on your tables and pens. There'll be breakout sessions in the latter half, and you're all going to be getting up and changing tables a bit. So I'm hoping to not speak that much as well. So for anyone who's been part of the leadership stream from Tuesday and Wednesday, especially my friend Alvin's presentation yesterday, he kind of shared some of his layers of his identity. I'm going to do the same thing for the same reason. So if anyone was in that session, it's that so that I can get to know you and you can get to know me, and we can sort of unpack some of these assumptions that we make about each other. So as Alison mentioned, I am an engineer. I work with CDM Smith Canada, and my bread and butter is wastewater treatment plants inside the fence. So I will disclose that my interface with operators is through the design phase, as well as supporting construction activities. So I'm not an operator myself. I do rely very heavily on operator experience And I know sometimes the operator-engineer relationship can be kind of weird and awkward, and like maybe there's some space there that I really like to try and close with good communication. And so, of course, one could expect that a male-dominated environment includes my work as an engineer in today's world. Another layer of myself is I am an athlete. I only moved to British Columbia 16 months ago. I grew up in Toronto, Ontario. I know, Toronto, Vancouver, I'm sorry. I know there's I try not to share that too often because it seems like there's a bit of a war between the two cities. But I moved out here for the outdoors. And so I really love cycling. I really love rock climbing. And so when an opportunity came up with a job to move to British Columbia, I said to myself, why not? But as you can imagine, sports, we all watch, I imagine, some competitive sport. It's very gendered. We do have to recognize there are physiological differences, but we categorize the genders, right? And so again, there's many comments and different things I experience when I'm just out at the gym doing my own experiences. I just minding my own business and someone decides to talk to me about something. And it, just can ruin the experience. So like, what can we do about those comments? What can we do about those assumptions that are made about us? And lastly, I mentioned that I am Asian, specifically, I am Chinese. I think it's really important to recognize that part of myself because I'm not just Chinese, I'm second generation Chinese. And so my parents immigrated here in the 60s and 70s, as with most immigrant stories, with nothing. And then raised my brother and I in Toronto. And it was just a very complex world. At home, we had a very East Asian Chinese culture. I was just talking, I think, I forget who I was talking to. Oh, Parmita, I think I was speaking to. And similarly with our cultures, it's like, I really only had three choices. I could be a lawyer, doctor, and engineer, and I guess they got what they want. My brother also is an engineer, so that probably didn't help. And so, I was living in two worlds. At home, I was listening to the languages I actually can't speak. That's part of the reason is my first kindergarten teacher was like, hey, you got to speak English in school. And I thought I was in trouble. So I just stopped speaking Chinese and I can't speak today. So that language barrier with my own parents, with my grandparents, it started with this comment that I took way too seriously. I would have really amazing lunch boxes at school. I got like homemade fried rice and homemade noodles, but all I wanted to fit in was the damn Lunchables. And objectively, I had better food, but that sense of wanting to feel included, to feel like I'm eating what everyone else is eating. And so I only pick 3 layers, and we all have many, many layers. And this ties into sort of what Alison and Kalpna mentioned about next year. How do we become more inclusive? This event's called Women of Water. There's more than just women here. Every one of us has more identities than being a woman or a man. I see you in the crowd. So I mentioned that I'm a woman, specifically also second generation Chinese. I am cisgender. That's something that Alison explained. There are people who don't identify with the sex they were born with, and they experience a completely different world in a male-dominated work environment than I do. We mentioned this already, but I'm also heterosexual. I do like dudes, and I'm able-bodied. I don't have a physical disability, and I just wanted to put this slide here because the scope of this, in the next 90 minutes really is kind of focusing on gender only, just because how can we possibly connect all these different social layers? But this is part of something called intersectionality, which I'm really excited that EOCP is going to venture into more diversity because we can talk about all these things. Not only are there physical disabilities, there are disabilities you can't see. And so what's behind that person? So for anyone that was at Alvin's presentation, I really liked his iceberg picture. I'm not sure who was there, but on top of the water are the things that you can see. You could have guessed that I was Asian. And whatever that's associated with, right? Maybe, oh, okay, Lunar New Year is going to come up. You could wish me a happy Lunar New Year. But there's all the things that are underneath the iceberg that you can't see that impacts the assumptions you make about that person and how I react to different things within the workplace. Okay, so I just want to start. Okay, so everyone, you need your phones for this next activity. I want to get a sense of where we are with like your quick assumptions. It's a riddle. Okay, don't think too hard about it. There's no wrong answer. We're going to kind of unpack it. It's just a really fun exercise. So a father and son get into a car. And if you know this riddle, please don't like give, I just see a lot of reaction. If you know the riddle, just answer it as you know. But if you don't know the riddle, just like your gut reaction. Okay, so a father and son get into a car and they're driving, but unfortunately get into a car crash. The father dies at the scene. And the son is sent to the hospital and the surgeon says, I can't operate on him. He's my son. So I need you to go to menti.com and enter this code. And the first, oopsie, I went too far. I need to switch to there we go. Who's the doctor? Just type it in. It's free form. Oh, I just want to see where everyone's sitting here. Oh, we should probably see some responses. Oh yeah, I see 5 people are in. I'll have to look at the other answers. His other father, yeah. Mom or dad too. Okay. I really urge you, if you haven't put in a response bonus stat, to put in your gut reaction. That's the purpose of this exercise, is not to be like how progressive one is. The biological parent, his other father. Okay, it's a bit of a mix. This word cloud uses how many people have responded, and like the bigger the word, the more that person, this room has responded that way. Grandfather. Okay, all right. You can go to the next question. This is a little hard to see, but if you just repeat your response into a bar chart, we can kind of get some specific numbers. So, oh wait, I think I can do this. Yeah. Okay, so again, your gut reaction. Like, did you not think it was possible and then you stole someone else's answer? I just want to get a gut reaction of like what you thought. You don't have to be embarrassed because I'm going to share you what I thought in a moment. Okay. Quick show of hands for whoever said the doctor was the mother. Have you heard this riddle before? Okay, all right. That's also good to know. Okay, so, all right. So a lot of you got it, but I saw a lot of head nods that if you got the right answer, who's the mother, you've heard this before. So like your quick subconscious, like wasn't tricked in this case. Okay, we can go back to the presentation. So I will say that my first response, this was many years ago, I was like, well, I'm super woke. I'm really progressive. I thought it was the second father. It's just a gay couple. Obviously, that's the answer. And then when the person was like, no, it's the mother, you dummy. I was like, oh, man. And I'm a woman. And I have friends who are women who are doctors, who are successful lawyers, who are successful doctors, like all these images of what we know women can be, but we just don't see that representation. And so I was also, quote unquote, tricked. And so what does that mean? Are we all sexist? Does anyone actually think they're sexist? I don't think I am. And similarly, are we ageist? Are we racist? Are we ableist? I don't think we are. I think we've all grown up in a world that teaches us these messages. So if you go to Google and you search doctor, what do you see? The vast majority are men. Similarly, CEO, you see the same thing. And then you see on the flip side, if you search nurse, what do you see? Yeah. So we have these stereotypes that like build in our heads. And so I'm assuming we're all like above 25, so our brains are kind of fully developed. So we take all of this stuff. And for anyone who has kids, I don't personally have kids, but I do have a niece. They pick up everything. They're always learning. And so I think it's really important to be sending the right message and how to, we're going to dig into it, but like about how we can do that. Growing up, I watched all 3 of these shows. They didn't age very well, especially the middle one. But these are direct quotes and lines that writers wrote into the script, right? I'm seeing some scornful faces. Yeah, these shows did not age well. but I thought they were hilarious, especially Friends. I think out of all of them, Friends was the most problematic when you rewatch them now with the language and how they make fun of gender, of how they make fun of Chandler's dad. Anybody remember that? You know, I laughed at that when I was in high school. And I have trans friends today, right? And so we all have an unconscious bias. And what I'm trying to get at is these immediate assumptions that we make about people and things is because we have this unconscious bias. And I'm also going to tie it back to the physiological nature of our brains. So this paper, oh, I didn't list a paper. Sorry, I grabbed this from a paper. There are 11 billion bits of information that we have to process every second. And our brain literally can only process 40. And so has anybody ever like been walking around and out of the corner of your eye, you see like some rope on the ground? I don't know why you would have rope, but I'm in climbing gyms a lot, or something else, and your brain's like, oh my gosh, that's a snake. Snakes were referenced twice today for some reason. That's your brain doing that automatic thinking, right? And so we just don't have the processing ability to always think outside of this unconscious bias. So really, it's just, I want to start this entire workshop by recognizing that we all have this. All of us have this. I'm going to get a little vulnerable. Growing up, I grew up in a neighborhood called Scarborough. It got amalgamated into Toronto. It is Toronto proper, but we refer to the borough as Scarborough. And the demographic of people who live there are a poorer demographic. And I grew up driving around with my parents. They carted me around. And this is what I grew up with. And to challenge what you grew up with and what you saw and all these things that form your unconscious bias is really tough. And I want everyone to recognize, whether you're a woman or a man, whatever you are, we all have this. And so we would be at a corner at a stoplight, and my mom would press the power locks if there was a Black person on the corner. What did I get from that? Okay, so Black people are dangerous. And that's still something I feel today. And I'm okay with admitting it, because you have to fight this. And so, you know, that's a really vulnerable thing to say, because now you all might think I'm racist. I mean, I hope you don't, because I don't take action with that. But I'm trying to really, really uncover this in my daily life all the time. And it's work. It's really hard work. It takes practice. Another emphasis I want to share with you is this paper. It was published in 2018. It recaps the findings and methodology, as a paper does, of an experiment called Draw a Scientist. And so there were 5,000 children across the US and Canada, so pretty close geographically, and they were draw a scientist. And overwhelmingly, out of the 5,000 drawings, they were mostly of men in some sort of, this is in 1966, I think, let me look at my notes, 1977. And so quite a long time ago. And so, yeah, they had a lab coat, they had glasses, they were doing lab work, typically indoors. I know there's people on the line, and you can type it into the chat as well, but out of 5,000, how many do you think were depicted as women? 1. Oh, we're real cynical, but that's pretty close. Anyone else have other numbers? 1%, okay. Anyone else? 20, that's really close. In this paper, they reported 28, which is 0.6%. And so if we think back, I mean, I wasn't alive at this time, but we are seeing progress. The reason why this paper was published in 2018 is they did sort of like follow up on this study and started seeing how representation of, in this case, just a woman or a man, that the representation of women depicted as a doctor or a scientist in children's books, in media, and things that children from kindergarten to grade 12 would see is increasing. And I don't know if they did a follow-up study where it's like, let's do this again to change these numbers, but they did talk about the increase in representation. Okay, so all to say, one of the themes I wanted to bring up today is I really feel that there's strength in empathy. Oftentimes when people have made assumptions about me and have said something to me that made me uncomfortable, I'm just like rageful. Like, how could you think that? Why did you say this to me? Do you know how hurtful it is? But I just admitted 2 pretty big things. 1, I thought the doctor was the second father. And I was like so proud of that. And I shared that story about what my mom's actions that has influenced me to this day. And I'm sure everyone can think of different experiences that have shaped your views today that you just have to keep fighting at, right? In the breakout groups, the practical solution exercise that we're going to do, I think it's easier to do when you realize like the offender is also subject to this, right? We're not all perfect. We're not all always on the ball. And so that's why I wanted to share that I didn't really get that riddle correct either. Okay. So as I mentioned, I moved to British Columbia because I really like cycling. At one point, I think I owned 7 bikes, much to my parents' dismay, because they took up a lot of space in their home. And one thing I wanted to relate to in terms of male-dominated experiences is when I started cycling, I don't know if anyone sees like the weekend warriors and spandex riding. I used to be one of those. But oftentimes I would show up and I would be the only woman. Just with where I was living in Ontario at the time, I wasn't like right downtown. I was sort of in a suburb. And so the demographic of people who were living there, I think, were like young parents. And cycling, the capital cost of cycling is quite expensive. You can get an entry-level road bike, maybe $1,000, shoes, clothing. It adds up really quick. And so it's a very affluent sport. And what would show up, I would be the only woman. And for years, they would come, I'd be riding beside them, and some man would say, "You're really fast." Can anyone guess how this sentence ended? Even worse for a girl. I was like 28. It's like, would you say this? You know, there's 50 people on this ride, you know, we all ride 2 by 2. I'm sure if you're a driver, you're probably really annoyed that you can't pass us. And it's like, are you saying this to the other 49 people on this ride? No, like we're all moving at the same pace. You're saying this specifically because I'm different than you. And for a long time, I didn't know why this made me feel so gross. I was like, they're just being nice, right? They're just trying to give me a compliment. But what does this really mean? Like, what's the underlying message that this would send? If there was a 3-year-old hearing this, what is the 3-year-old going to pick up? Girls are slow. I'm less than you just because, well, first of all, I wasn't a girl, but just because I was a woman. But I was keeping up. I was showing up every Saturday. I was showing up every Sunday. And I had no idea how to respond to this. I just kind of like nervously laughed and was like, "Oh, thank you." I just didn't know what to say. Eventually, I ended up speaking with people and talking to other women, even other men. And I got this trick, and I did employ it once when I was like, okay, I'm ready. I am equipped. The next time someone says this to me, I'm going to say this back. But I still felt like my heart was pumping. I mean, my heart was pumping because I was cycling, but my heart was pumping more because I was almost too scared to say it. But the response that I practiced was, does that make you really slow for a boy? But it took me a long time to even know that that's something I could say, right? And so I said it once, and I want to share the story through to the end because there are men in the room, and you might be like, well, no one says this stuff to me. But how can you be part of this conversation? That's what I said back. And then he got all weird and was like, that's not what I meant. That's not really what I meant. I meant it this way. And it's like, okay, well then say what you mean. Don't also backhand insult me at the end. And then we arrive at the coffee shop, and Toronto hosted the Pan Am Games in 2015. So this happened in 2015 when I finally got to say this back. We get to the coffee shop. He's still defending. He's still deflecting. He's still defending. We're lining up for coffee. And that morning, Adam Van Couverden, who's a kayaker, Canadian kayaker, he had just posted a call out on Facebook to the reporters at the Pan Am Games, asking them to focus on the athleticism of the women who were competing, and don't ask them what they're wearing, right? Like tennis players, who are you wearing? Can you give us a little twirl? Like just how you report women's sports versus male sports. And he heard this whole conversation. He steps in and he's like, Richard, what I think Alison is trying to say is, and he repeated exactly what I was saying, and Richard shut up. I'm not here to solve why that's the case, but that is very powerful. For whatever reason, I have found that men will listen to other men. So if you're wondering, why did I show up on Thursday? That is something that you can help us in these conversations. Not that we're, princesses that need to be saved, but that is a way that you can be an ally in these types of situations. Okay, time check. All right, so intent versus impact. For anyone who was at Alvin's presentation, he talked about this as well. I don't actually think Richard was a bad man. I think he really wanted to give me a compliment. I do. But it didn't come across to me that way. His intention was good, his impact was bad. And so I wanted to share a little bit about myself so I can show how we all perceive the world in different ways. And I can even recognize another woman in that same position may not have felt as off-put as me. It could maybe roll off their back. And so, if you're looking for a guide to how to be nice to other people, we're not going to have one. It's really individual, and getting to know people really helps with that. There's maybe like safe boundaries you should stay within, right? Just side note, don't ask someone when they're expecting if you don't know they're expecting. That's happened to several of my friends. Don't do that, right? There's more reasons than just the physical, but that's neither here or there, but that is one example. That's a safe place not to go. So intent is what one wanted to do, but communication is a two-way street. It also matters how the receiver interprets it. And so you can try and have a bit more empathy in these situations. Like, I'm very rageful, but now being 8 years away, I'm not rageful towards Richard anymore, or the other tens of people who have said this to me. I just don't think they understood language. And language can be done in many different ways. I used examples of spoken language, but the example I gave about my mom, I love her, obviously, was body language. There were no words spoken when she power locked, but I could see out the window and I know why she did it, because it was a repeated offense, right? So we have spoken language. I gave a couple examples of spoken language. We can have written language. Has anyone ever been on an email chain and it said, "Hello, gentlemen"? Okay, cool, thanks. Small aggressions here and there. And then I mentioned one example about body language. And I find body language, though silent, is actually one of the most powerful things I've personally experienced. And I wanted to show this one scene of a show called Mad Men. Has anyone ever watched Mad Men? Okay, does anyone recognize this scene? I was so moved by this scene. I thought it was done so well. I'm not like a huge film buff or like filming, technical, but I thought the actresses did it so well, and how they panned the camera was really well done. The very high level is that Peggy is moving on up at an advertising company. I think she started as a secretary, and I think this particular episode was 1966, so also representative of the time. And she realized her coworker, who still remains a secretary, Dawn, who is Black, was sleeping at the office. So she offers her home to her. In this still image, is there anything anyone notices that's the focus, if anyone even remembers this episode? Standing and sitting, there's something on the coffee table. The purse. And so in the storyline as the audience, we know that there's $400 cash in 1966 in that purse. And this entire scene, as she turns off the light and goes to her bedroom, as an audience member, you know that Peggy's like, "Oh man, the purse with my money. But if I take it, she's gonna think I'm racist." And the scene ends. So Peggy and Dawn had an entire conversation with each other and with the audience with just body language, just standing there in silence. And when I tried to find this image, I went down some rabbit holes of Reddit threads, and like people still remember this scene and everyone's talking about it. And what does it mean that Peggy didn't take it? Would she have taken it if it was a white person in her living room? Right? These are all fictional characters, but these things play out in real life, right? I used the example of my mom. Again, I love her. But she didn't necessarily know about that, the impact that it had on me as an adult today. Okay. So why does language matter? All of these things have been said to me. Thanks. Where are you really from? I know a lot of people probably identify with that. I am from Canada. I was born here. You're overreacting. Women get this all the time. Is there really such thing as overreacting? Like, if your body is responding in a rageful way, is that really overreacting? it might be for someone else, right? I recognize that, as I said, you're really fast for a girl, may not bother another woman. I don't like being called a girl, period. But it's not overreacting for me. So I really don't like that. Hello, gentlemen, dear sir. It's just like, okay, am I part of this team or am I not part of this team? And then really that last one could be literally anything. You're really whatever positive adjective for a girl. And I find that I really dislike that as well. So just quick raise of hand. I'm not in the chat, you can type in yes. Has anyone heard this term microaggression? Okay. So who has not heard of this term micro? Oh, that's great. Awesome. Okay. So they're everyday stereotypical comments or nonverbal communication that include assumptions about that marginalized group. And I love that I'm going after Wendy because she talks about psychological safety, right? And this idea of these microaggressions can happen once, multiple times a day, and it could be death by 1,000 cuts, right? I actually stopped playing volleyball on co-ed teams because I just needed to stop hearing that I was less than. And so I don't know, who knows does anyone know how to play volleyball? Does anyone play volleyball? Yeah, that's okay. You know, there's this thing in like just recreational volleyball that if you're not going to spike, the other team will say free ball. So like, okay, team, you can relax. You don't have to dig. And people would say that as I was like, gearing up to spike. I'm not that short. Like you can learn how to jump, you can learn how to hit. And it's like, that is an assumption they made to me. I played on teams where if I was being set to and the setter was a man, he would just set to the other person who was another man. Again, nonverbal, all body language. And I was like, if you don't want me here, I don't need to be here. And so every single time I just was like, what? This doesn't bring me any more joy. So I actually stopped playing. I recently started playing again, which is great people, but I guess I just was playing with the wrong people. But that's the kind of impact you can have on someone. And how does that translate into work? If you keep getting these little messages every single day, multiple times a day, are you going to enjoy work? Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I didn't know how. I was mostly just rageful. But that's sort of what we're going to do in the breakout sessions is like sort of hear from everyone about what sort of microaggressions you've experienced and equip ourselves with things that you can say or communicate back. And there's not always a safe place to do that. In that case, this particular person on that volleyball team, I just like don't talk to him anymore. I mean, they live in Ontario, but I never learned the tools to talk to him without being angry. Yeah. Okay. So when employees feel safe, they can express themselves and take risks. They become more engaged, and that drives innovation, competitiveness, and financial performance. This is a CEO of an organization called Catalyst. They pair up with different organizations to help their CEOs build workplaces built for women. At my last firm, I was quite involved with their DEI efforts, and what that included were things called business resource groups or employee resource groups, where you can talk to other people in the firm globally, if it's a global firm, and start having these conversations and run events. That's how I know about Catalyst, because we leaned into the resources that they had, and I think they gave us a guest speaker. We had an event. So I pulled this quote from her, and I think this is true. When we're feeling the most safe, psychologically safe, generally speaking, I think most of us probably feel physically safe, more or less. There's now legislation in place to, prevent physical, those types of things, but there's less with these little small comments. Like, I'm not going to go to HR and complain about someone who's saying this really small thing. I'm personally not comfortable with that. And so it's just the more awareness we can build around this and the more that we equip ourselves to deal with it one-on-one. Again, if it's safe, I'm going to talk about those types of things. I think the better we can start feeling the confidence in being in a male-dominated workplace. So I would like everyone to pull their phones up again. I'm going to ask you all to be a little bit more vulnerable. And just straight up, have you experienced microaggressions? There's no right or wrong answer. It could be workplace or not workplace. The results right now don't surprise me. I would imagine everyone has in some way. I think it's almost everyone in the room. And in the chat, right? There's 42 people signed in. Okay, so this impacts all of us, more or less. I'd love to hear from the people who said maybe and not sure. I don't know if you're in the room or in the chat, but we're going to have breakout groups later, so I'll try and walk around a little bit. If you're feeling safe and vulnerable, what microaggressions have you experienced? This is free form. You can, I think there's a cap on characters, but you can summarize what has happened. And kind of remember this for later, because we're literally going to take examples at each table, and hopefully with your peers at your meeting today, we can think about tools that we can say back or do. Being left out of emails. Yep. While everyone's typing, another thing that I find really frustrating with microaggressions as a woman is, am I being left out of emails because I'm a woman? I don't know the answer to that. And that takes up way more energy than I think it should. But I think we all wonder. It could be completely a harmless thing, or it could be because you're a woman. And even that is tiring. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. Being called sweetie, yeah, that's actually one of my examples we're going to go through. Cut off in the bike park because I'm a woman and I think I'm slower. Yep. I once flashed. When I say flash, it means I do a route. Pardon me? Yeah, it's climber talk. A grade that's, I mean, not, again, grades are subjective. You know, I've been climbing for many years, so it wasn't that hard for me. And I was really excited that I flashed a route, which means I did it clean. And I've done it before, but I got it all together. And I was climbing with someone I didn't know very well, but he was a man, and he was like, oh, it couldn't have been this one. You mean this one? And he pointed to an easier route. And it's like, how did I possibly offend you? I was trying to share some joy, but okay, never climbed with him again. We don't need any more women here. Wow. You were from Middle East. Oh God. Okay. Being the only woman and asked to take notes on the meeting. I've also been asked to make coffee. Don't be so emotional that, yeah, being left out of decision-making, making judgments with a comment like, well, in your culture, without knowing anything about me or my culture. Okay, this is 22 responses. That's way more than I expected. I know it's anonymous, so that's good, but all of you are being quite vulnerable here, so I really appreciate it. Being shown the coffee pot because I needed to know how to use it. I'm sorry. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Please hold on to these if you're comfortable sharing it later, because we'll kind of work on these in the breakout groups. And I want to just tie it back to feelings, because we're emotional beings. I know it's like, oh, you got to be like, put a strong face at work. You know, first time I cried at work, I felt so embarrassed. But now I really find courage in being that vulnerable. So how do these microaggressions make you feel? If I were typing, I would just write bad. Like, I don't. Also rageful. I have some anger, but it makes me feel bad, insecure. Yeah. I mean, wow, just a lot of annoyed, yes, all of them. And I knew this would happen because, again, we're really not that different. Humans don't react so differently to the same sort of aggressions or offenses. Are any of these positive? They're all bad, right? They're all bad feelings. There are times where if something's happened, it's ruined the rest of my day. I'm less productive. I can't focus. I get a little shaky, right? I don't really feel safe being in an office one-on-one with maybe the offender. That's a really strong word, but the person who has made the microaggression, hurt, unworthy. Yeah, these are all bad feelings, and it impacts the rest of your day, right? And if you keep having these sort of microaggressions and death by 1,000 cuts, are you going to really feel happy at work? I mean, I'm not sure if it's reasonable to be happy every day at work, but more good days than bad days, I hope. Okay, so thank you for sharing. Please hold on to some of the, if you're comfortable again with sharing with your groups, we're going to get even more vulnerable. Oh, I need to go back to the slide, sorry. Should I click? All right, so I'm going to tell one of my recent stories that made me feel super uncomfortable. And I went into that situation knowing what I could say, but I still couldn't say it. So I'm in a room, I'm in the contractor trailer, in the contractor PM's office, which is probably not bigger than this stage. And there's 4 other older white men with me on site at a construction site, at a wastewater treatment plant. And we just finished a meeting talking about a baseline schedule, and that one of our requirements for that client is don't start commissioning on a Friday. Anyone who's an operator is like, yeah, we won't have resources on a weekend. It's written to the contract, but they had not shown that in their schedule. There were activities that were starting on a Friday or a holiday, cannot happen. So we're resolving it, and they're like, no, we totally understand, client. We understand, we just kind of messed up. We're going to fix that. And then regales the story of a time that they did try to commission a pump station on a Friday. And the owner said, okay, well, we'll let you try, but if you don't make it, your guys have to come in, bring a cot, and manually operate the pump station all weekend. So the story, as the contractor was telling it, is like they couldn't do it. And so the contractor did come in, and someone stayed there all weekend with a cot and operated a pumping station manually. The story could have ended here. We could have just been like, thank you for the story. Let's not commission on a Friday, right? Like, make sure all the commissioning plans are put into place. It didn't stop there. A different person says, oh, well, he must have had a lot of fun because he was away from his wife all weekend. And everyone erupted in laughter. And I was so shaken by this joke at the expense of someone we didn't even know, their partner. So many assumptions. Did they have a partner? Was their partner a woman? Was their partner a wife? And this idea of just like, oh, marriage is so awful. I'm not married, but it just seems like this running joke of like, marriage is awful. It's like, it's a jail. When I was riding bikes, there was all this talk of like, oh, did your wife let you out to play? Are you doing the short loop or the long loop? And it's just like, why are you talking about your marriage as if it's jail? Again, maybe there's something I don't know because I'm not married, but like, I didn't know what to say. And so everyone erupted in laughter. I felt uncomfortable and I didn't know what to say. And like, one of the easiest things to say, if there's sexist humor or racist humor, or any sort of humor that's like inappropriate, is you could not engage. I happened to engage by laughing because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong. I didn't want to be that weird one out. But this works really well because like people don't like silence. And I keep referencing my friend Alvin, but it was great because he mentioned during his talk that he's going to engage with silence a little longer. And at the end, he asked a question. It took a really long time and he made a joke about it, right? Like, thanks for saving my presentation. People don't like silence, right? That's non-verbal communication. And if you don't laugh, they're definitely going to notice. And you're already sending a message by not participating in the joke. But I really like this one. This is what I wanted to say, like after the moment. Can you explain to me why that's funny? What do you think they're going to say? I didn't mean it that way. Okay, then what did you mean? But it takes a lot of like, this happened recently. So it's more close to like my emotional state. So I'm already like, I don't know if I could say, if this happened again, like tomorrow, I'm like telling you guys what to say, but like, could I do it? I don't know. But at least it's like in the back of my head that if it happens again, maybe I could say it. I am surprised you made this joke. This is really good when you know that person and you expect more of them and you already have that somewhat personal relationship. You can say this. I don't think I could have because I didn't know the person who said it. I probably would have went with the first two if I remembered, which I did not. I feel uncomfortable by your words. That's another one for someone that you already know. And this one's really great because if you do have that personal relationship, you're kind of meeting them where you are. And I'll tell you a story of someone who did this to me, called me in, really. I was hanging out with my friend and we were talking about something. I was talking about a colleague who happened to be male, who has a wife, who doesn't have like an outside home job. And I said, well, I don't think his wife works. And she looked at me and she said, oh, Allie, she works. And I started to defend myself. My immediate reaction was like, that's not what I meant, right? Intent versus impact. And I just stopped myself. I'm like, I'm with a friend. She's just letting me know that that can have more layers of impact to anyone that's listening. We were at her home. No one else was listening. But I know what she means. Again, not a mother myself, but I do have a niece. I have a sister-in-law, and it's work. Like I've babysat my niece and I'm like, holy crap, I'm going to give her back to you now. And so it's work, right? And so she knew that if someone else was there, they could have taken that as, you know, unpaid labor is not work, but it is. Okay, someone put this into the mentee vote, being called a pet name, sweetie or honey. You can be very direct. You can call me my name. Very quickly, anyone in the room, in the chat, you can type yes. I can't see the chat, but has anyone been called a pet name? Yeah. Has it made you uncomfortable? Yeah. Yeah, these things, you know, they say it takes less than a second. You're thinking about it for the rest of the week, right? It's energy that you're carrying. It's not okay. If you want more sass and you know them, I must have forgotten to tell you my name. It's your name. This is really fun if you have the courage to do this. I don't know if I would, especially if you know they know your name. And so you're sending this extra message through these words. I feel uncomfortable being called that. I think this works, again, better if you have a more personal relationship. And then, because this offers a bit more dialogue, right? It doesn't just stop it in its tracks. I think I have one more here. I prefer to be called by my name. Yeah. Yeah, so I think it was the sassy one where I said, does that make you really slow for a boy? There's this tactic called like role reversal. Yeah. Yeah. So you can call them a pet name to them. And again, you're sending an implicit message. And yeah, have you employed that? Use the same one. I love it. Yeah. 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 Great. Okay. Being referred to as bossy, aggressive, and abrasive. I get this a lot because I tend now to be a manager type role or a team lead. The first time I heard it was when I was 22 and I was finishing my university degree. I started a student run, like 25-piece engineering jazz band. And I was pretty ruthless. Oh, sorry. See, I just called myself something that I thought was just good leadership skills. But I did not let rehearsal start until everyone was there on time. And so if you were 15 minutes late and you didn't tell me you were running late, you held up 24 other people because I showed up an hour before rehearsal to set up the drum set, to like help the people unload from the car into the rehearsal room. And I didn't think it was fair, you know, in a 10-week semester that you wasted 15 minutes of everyone else's time. Just let me know if you're coming late or not coming. I just need to know. That's the accountability I wanted to me as the organizer of a jazz band that would perform at the end of each month. And at the end, even though we had a successful charity, I called it a charity gig every semester, I sold over 200 tickets to this great, my parents came up from Toronto. It was really, really meaningful to me to graduate with this great show. And then one of my friends was like, you're ruled with an iron fist. Or I just did really well. Like that jazz band still exists today. Right? Many cohorts of you know, engineers who now get to play music while trying to study engineering. And so, I don't know, I thought I just did a good job. And so what could you say to this? Again, just pushing it back to that person. What makes you say that? And then they're going to have to dig deeper, right? Because if you look up the word bossy, it's negative. There's undertones of implying that like it's too much. And we all know, I'm sure we all know that men get told that they're good leaders, and when women are good leaders, we're bossy. So you can just ask them, kind of like with the jokes, what's funny about that? What makes you say that? And then you can like really own that. You can reclaim the word. Great. Yeah, I know. You know, I'm actively leading this project and I'm the manager and I have the experience and expertise to do a good job. So thanks. And the second one's kind of similar, just like different words. So you can reclaim what they're saying and flip it back on them. And they're just going to be like, what? They're not going to know what happened. I don't know if I can do this. I haven't been called bossy in a while, at least not to my face. But I did some crowdsourcing with some of my friends to prepare for these potential solutions. It's not going to work for everyone. I do want to recognize that you should consider the environment. It may not feel safe because they're your direct manager and has, direct influence on your career. There's a power dynamic there. And if that's for every individual to decide whether or not that's something they could say and what other negative impacts, right? Currently, I personally feel like I have the privilege to almost say anything I want, and I'm not too worried about my financial situation. And I'm very lucky to be in that position, but not everyone is. And so I'm not saying here are some words that you should say, and then like someone says something to you and you say it back. Every situation could be a little bit different. You may not want to respond immediately. Maybe you want some time and you can circle back in a week and say, hey, there was something that you said last week that really bothered me. Can we chat about it? Maybe that prepares you better. And because you maybe don't want to lose, let's say, a friendship outside of work because it's impacting you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a really, I'll repeat it. The person in the crowd said, I've heard before that if we respond, I guess maybe more with like sort of a sassy response, then you're kind of stooping to their level. That's really interesting. I'd be curious to talk to my therapist about that. Yeah, it could. I mean, not to point out, but how do you feel about that? So I'm for the people in the virtual, I'm going back to the person with the pet names who suggested like call them the pet name, which is maybe quote unquote stooping to their level. Like, how does that make you feel? And okay, I'll repeat that. So what was your name? Sonia. So Sonia says that in this example where you call the other person that's the same pet name back, she doesn't believe it's stooping to their level. It's a very quick way to make them aware of what they've said to you. I don't know. I'm going to go back to the original commenter. What do you think? Do you think, yeah, Mike's going around. Yeah, thanks. This is a really great conversation. We're going to get more into it.
Say it back to the person, they get the feeling how it feels.
That's true, yeah.
Call the name like that, but in school, they say when you repeat something, you're going to their level. That's what was brought up on.
Tara, I'm going to say the patriarchy makes us feel that we can't stoop to their level.
I would say from my experience in the past, I've been good at, I think it's almost playing along though. So you're making the joke because you don't want to make it a big deal. It is a big deal. And for myself, like having now worked in a very male dominated industry for almost 20 years now, I wish that I had made it a big deal. Like when I look back.
I think this could be like quite deeply personal. Like I'm not good at the sassy responses. I freeze up. And then I'm like, it's taking too much energy. I don't want to deal with it. I tend to run away. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts about stooping to another person's level? I've never thought about this. So this is really quite interesting. No, I think it's really good conversation and maybe it could be very individual. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it is individual, and I would add that it might depend on where you're at. It might depend on how flexible you can be. Can you just find a different job? So it is very individual. It depends on your own tolerance as well. Yeah. Which I think, like for myself in my younger years, I was a lot more tolerant. Now I'm just fed up with it. Yeah. So it depends. I would agree as well. I think not only was I more tolerant, I don't think I knew what was happening. I just felt bad. I couldn't pinpoint why it made me feel bad.
I was called ballsy.
Mm,
And
yes, the
a
classic genital compliment.
it was by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was like, okay, fine, we're ending this meeting. We're not getting anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But meeting with her boss later on, we kind of joked about it. And I basically said, yeah, I got called ballsy. Yeah, that's fine. I own it.
Mm-hmm. So you, in that way, you wanted to reclaim it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be offended by that. I refuse to, considering the source, I'm not going to be offended by that.
Right. Right. In mountain biking, we name trails. And sometimes if there's like a drop or a big feature, there's usually a bypass line. And the name of the bypass line, for some, well, not for some reason, patriarchy, but it is often named after some female genital part. And it's like, okay, well, again, what message is that sending to every single woman that's riding those trails, whether they take the real line, like the feature, or if they take the bypass line? What message is that sending? And so there's efforts within different athletic communities as well to change the language used in those sports as well, like renaming things, like just calling it a bypass line. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so courage and vulnerability. Wendy mentioned Brene Brown. If you've never heard of her, she's great. She's an American professor and writer, and she talks a lot about courage and empathy and vulnerability and shame. And so she says here, it's a quote, "Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage." So I do thank everyone that's spoken. I know that sometimes it's even nerve-wracking to like speak into a mic, even though you're not on stage, as well as for everyone sharing, through the Mentimeter, your different microaggressions that you experience, because when you share it, sometimes you relive it. So I can imagine that some people are maybe in a heightened emotional state. But what we're going to do next, I'm just going to check the time. There's 5 tables. Okay. There's half an hour left. So there's 5 tables. I would like to spend maybe 3 to 4 minutes at each table. I'm going to do a timer. Oh, I didn't. There we go. I want to, with your group, brainstorm possible responses to different microaggressions. And this really could, I know this is sort of in the workplace, but I kind of want to make it loose, like anywhere. It could be personal. It could be in other activities that you do. Like for me, it's sports, or in the workplace that you've experienced I wrote in the workplace, but it could be anything. I want to use something called the World Cafe style. I wasn't sure how many tables there are. So there are 5 tables, I think. That back table, I'm not sure if you want to join another group. So maybe there's 4. Okay, 4 tables in the room, and then the chat. I don't know how many people are in the chat, but hope you can kind of be one table. I want one person to stay through all the rounds and maybe write down some responses to that specific microaggression. And I want everyone else to get up and go to different tables every 4 minutes. So 4 times 4 is 16 minutes. Yeah, I think that will work. And then we'll come back, and I'm not going to make a table present anything. We are going to kind of collect some thoughts of like any ones that felt really meaningful to you or like really, really good or common. And then I have a couple wrap-up slides. So let me just set the timer. So you can stay in your current tables now and decide who's going to stay at that table, who will also be the scribe. And every 4 minutes, I'm going to ask everyone to get up and go to a different table, which also helps everyone meet each other. So I'm going to do 4 minutes. And for those in the virtual, please chat with yourselves. You'll have 16 minutes to chat. And the 4 minutes start now. And I'm going to walk around and try and meet all of you. 1 minute left for this round. Okay, you can wrap up your conversations, and for everyone but the scribe, you can get up and change tables. And I'm loving the chat too. As people are moving tables, I find one specific thing in the chat like quite interesting. Someone said that they were allowed to attend the conference for today only and not the rest. And overwhelmingly, the people in the room, for the people in the chat, are women. It's very typical to have these types of events and only that particular focus group shows up. And even when it changes to diversity in water, I would imagine it will tend to be more women. So that's interesting. That's a really good question. You can ask your boss, why wouldn't the entire conference benefit you? Because it would. Oh my gosh. Can we save the chat afterwards as well? Okay. All right, for those in the room, you can wrap up your conversation and then head to your third table. I'm reading the chat and I agree. I don't know if this has come up to the tables in the room, but if you react and respond to any of these microaggressions, oftentimes we get, in this case, Allison says, we get labeled as bitchy. That's sort of in the same vein of like overreacting or being too emotional. That might be true. I'm not sure if there's a way to prevent that, but for me, I feel like I have a bit more closure. Okay, some of these offenses in the chat are outrageous. I'll see if I can get a hold of it and I can pull all the presentation together if anybody wants it afterwards. All right, you can wrap up this conversation and this is the last rotation. And it's possible that all of you have already met everyone. So if you don't necessarily want to move, you can stay, but just one last rotation. Okay, so we're wrapping up on the last World Cafe round. If you want to go back to your original table because your water is there, that's fine. I'll let everyone some time to settle and we can go back to the slides. I did reserve a little bit of time for anyone that really wants to share one of their experiences and or a possible response with the group, and chat included. I guess if you want to share, I think someone's looking at the chat as well in the virtual. Maybe you can preface the text by saying, I want to share, and then we can read it out loud. Or I don't know if you have mics, you can, actually, I don't know if we have audio. So yeah, maybe someone will read it. So I have a little bit of time here. Oops, the wrong way.
So I've got an individual online who said, one individual putting on a course kept calling me beautiful, and then my company fired him.
Well done, company.
Yeah.
I have one. This is going back a few years ago, and for some reason or the other, I had Maple Leaf Lounge access, which a few years ago was predominantly male territory. And if there were women there, they very often were with their spouse.
This is a airport lounge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Aeroplan kind of Maple Leaf Lounge. And so this is a few years ago. I'm in a lineup trying to get a drink at the Maple Leaf Lounge in Montreal. I'm walking up and it's like they're not, any women of color are usually working there in terms of cleaning up, picking up stuff. And so I'm walking towards the bar and this guy cuts me off. Older, sorry, white dude. And he cuts me off and I just paused for a moment and went, and he paused and he looked and he realized that I didn't actually work there. And he goes, oh, did I cut you off? And I said, yes, you did, but that's okay. Age before beauty.
Sassy. I love the sass. Yeah. Yeah. I don't have many zingers.
There was another online one where they had said in their company, they were told that they didn't like to hire women because they will just get pregnant.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Some of the chat ones were like really outrageous to me, like really kind of got my heart pumping.
Anybody else want to highlights?
Okay, no other ones. Okay, so the last, oh, I'm too late. Again, it's hard, right? Calvin will just share that that's only one of her zingers. Maybe we all don't want to use zingers. I don't know. So you can always try and let it go and lean on your supports to get through those moments. And sometimes venting helps, right? You can ask a friend, do you have capacity? I want to vent about something that happened today. I just want someone to hear me. I just want someone to validate me. Because like I said, the energy that's spent wondering whether it's because I'm a woman, or is it because I'm Chinese, or is it because I have short hair and I don't mold to the image of a woman. I've definitely had comments about my short hair, and it's like, it's just hair. You can respond immediately, which was the focus of this sort of workshop. You may not be able to, I still freeze up, but at least you kind of have these ideas in the back of your head. And maybe at a time as you continue to be empowered and gain more confidence, you can say it right away. And then obviously you can respond later, which is not something I focused on at all. But you could probably say a lot of the same elements, and you can spend the time, you can lean on your community to find out how you can approach that particular unique situation. Because again, there could be power dynamics and that sort of thing. So I want to end with building resiliency in your community. I'm really grateful that I was asked to participate in this conference. I mentioned earlier that I'm just an engineer that sits at her desk, sometimes designing stuff. So I don't always get to interface with operators. So that it's been really, really neat being able to do that at this conference. So thank you for the invitation. This is a picture of me and some of my girlfriends in Toronto. We saw this mural under a bridge, and we're like, well, we gotta go over there and take a picture. Strength in numbers. And so the reason why I wanted to do the World Cafe style was I really wanted everyone to get to know each other and kind of talk about different solutions and how we feel about different offenses. Conferences are such a great opportunity. And for those on the chat who said they could only attend this, I hope you can attend the rest of it next year, and hopefully we can all meet each other. Very much looking forward to diversity of water with EOCP again next year. That's a great idea. I really think that's great. And I have one last quote here. It's hard to be what you can't see. So Marianne Ellerman is a child's rights activist. So for everyone in this room, thank you for being here and, you know, going to work every day in a male-dominated workplace. Back to the Draw a Scientist sort of the paper, the more that we can see, you know, female operators, you know, the focus of this conference, female engineers, female scientists, all of those things, the better message that we're sending to younger folks and people around us. So please get contacts from all the tables that you sat at. You can find me on LinkedIn. You might have to type in my company because apparently there's a lot of Alison Chans. I just did that earlier today. And this is my email address. You can grab it down. I will work, I think, probably with some of the conference folks. I want to capture everything people said in the chat. And I can also screen capture everything that you've inputted into Menti. And so if you want a copy of everything put together, I can do that. Just send me an email. It might be a little while before I respond. I might just wait for all the emails and then I'll blast it out for you guys to download it. So again, thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful and maybe you learned something. At least you maybe validated your feelings and you experienced some empathy from those in the room. And I smell food. So I think, and thank you for those in the chat for engaging for like the full 16 minutes because you couldn't quite rotate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating and being so open and awesome. I can't believe the stories I heard around the table. All I can say is we have a whole bunch of incredibly resilient people in this room and online. So thank you again, and I will pass it on to Kalpna.
It's actually interesting, the quote that Alison had there in the last slide. It's hard to be what you can't see. And that is, it's with that intent that we have our Operate on the Job video series, because the idea there was if you can see it, you can be it. That's why we have women, we have people of color, we have First Nations women in our Operate on the Job series, because if you don't see anyone that you can identify with in a particular career, you might think it's not for you. But now that we're trying to increase the number of people that others can identify with. So on that note, it's a wrap. Thank you very much, everyone. And we're so glad you could come to our conference this year, and save the dates on 9th, 10th, and 11th of September 2024. We'll see you then.